So we're going to have a panel discussion now about physical activity, nutrition, and emotional well-being. And our panelists are Megan Byer, psychologist, Lauren Scanlon, whom you've already stretched with, physical therapist, and Shaylee Shaw, who's going to talk about nutrition. Now, before we start with the panel, there is a comprehensive healthcare team. Some of you may already have met all the people on this team, and some of you may not have as yet, but we want you to know who they are, okay? So the important thing is that you and your care partner are at the center of this team. You're really the captains of the ship. So what Francesca said about talking with your provider is really important. You are your own best self-advocates, and you are the ones who share the priorities and concerns that then drive what your healthcare team is doing to help you live as best you can with MS. All of these other people can be invaluable to you over the course of time. I just want to call out that the mental health professional can be there to help with mood or mood changes, even at the moment of diagnosis when you're overwhelmed by this news and wondering how to deal with all your feelings. The speech language pathologist can help you assess your cognition, whether you think you have changes already or you just want to get a baseline. They're very important. Physical therapists can also help you get your baseline information, learn how you're doing so you have something to compare. All of these people can be invaluable. And even if you don't feel that you need them right now, what some people find helpful is getting to know one, having a relationship, so that if the time comes that you then need that person, you already have met them and they know you and know something about your background, okay? So we're going to start first by talking about diet. Again, remember, you can have questions at any time, but please raise your hand so we can make sure you get on mic.
Hi, everyone. My name is Dr. Shaylee Shaw. I'm one of the neurologists and specifically MS doctors at Vanderbilt University. Today, I'm going to be talking to you all a little bit about why diet is important in multiple sclerosis. And let me move this a little bit. Okay. We'll talk a little bit about why diet is important in multiple sclerosis. Many of you that have been in the office, patients or care partners, oftentimes bring this question up and we have a discussion about it. And I think it's a personalized topic in that what kind of we decide and what we talk about, what each person thinks might be best for them kind of varies. And I think that's really important. And I think it's really important that we're having these conversations in the clinic and that patients are having these conversations afterwards. Why is diet so important for MS? Why it's important for MS is because it's overall important for your general well-being. We know that your immune system relies on having a healthy diet, nutrition, from all the different foods that we consume on a daily basis. And we know, for example, that your mitochondria, the cells of your body, rely on proper nutrition. We know that diet is important. We know it impacts your immune system. We know it affects the cells of your body, and we know your mitochondria is nourished by the different foods that you eat. We know that antioxidants in your body are important for your health overall. Again, it's all about your general well-being. And so what I typically tell people, what I start with when I'm talking about diet is that the things that are overall good for your health, the things that are overall good for the different medical issues that you have, the comorbidities, that's what is going to help you the most with your multiple sclerosis. We talk about fatigue, and I think that being able to have a healthy diet can certainly help. And it can certainly empower patients to really kind of feel better about themselves. Oh, thank you. So, other reasons why diet are really important, right, is, like I've mentioned, really important for your cells. A lot of different reasons, right? You have different proteins, different minerals, all of those that you get from your food that are needed to repair damaged cells in your body and your brain. How do you get these sources of nutrition? Typically, that's lean meats, less of red meats, right? Poultry, seafood, eggs, things like legumes, beans, nuts, seeds. Those are the sorts of things that we think are best for kind of obtaining some of those things in your diet. Another really important thing that we know is important for overall well-being, for your brain health, for your gut health, is fiber, right? It's another sort of key component that you can get in things like legumes, like different beans, kidney beans, that sort of thing. Whole grain foods are really important. Seeds, fruits, and vegetables. I think that sometimes a lot of these different sort of recommendations as far as the different types of foods that you can get all these things from can be a little bit overwhelming for people. So when I say all these things, we're just talking in general terms, but when I speak to a patient about this, I tend to kind of recommend one change or a couple changes at a time, sometimes sort of switching certain aspects of their diet, maybe starting to switch the type of bread they use. Or if they are, for example, drinking a lot of soda, we might talk about, let's just start by cutting out soda, really simple things that I think that we can kind of work on slowly, because this is sort of just one conversation of many that we're going to be having over the long term. Just to, in part, make this not as overwhelming for patients when we start to talk about all these different things that you can potentially do. One other really important thing that I always talk about with patients is vitamin D. We know that its effects in the body are sort of multifaceted. So it affects immune cells, it affects immune responses. We know it's responsible for inflammation. We know that it's important for fatigue. And so, in general, what I typically recommend is that if people are that people get checked for vitamin D. Sometimes we do it in the office. Sometimes a primary care doctor can do that. And we will recommend that people who are low in vitamin D in particular should start to supplement that with pills. Or sort of increasing exposure outside. There are, of course, other dietary ways to get this if you're not interested in doing things like pills, right? So certain fishes, eggs, certain meats, livers, and then other sort of fortified foods that have a lot of vitamins added to them or part of them. Again, this is kind of something where we also know that in MS specifically, and that it may be one factor of many that contributes to relapses or progression or the onset of MS. It's only one small part of it, but it's one that I think that people can kind of address if we think it's something that is low or problematic for that particular patient. Next slide. Other things that people can kind of do and incorporate into their diets are starting to incorporate things like omega-3 fatty acids. So again, we talked about sort of the antioxidant effects of some of these foods and sort of toxicity and a degeneration of cells over time, particularly when there isn't enough oxygen. And that's something that these sort of omega-3 fatty acids can kind of help towards. And there are a couple different ways to get these omega-3 fatty acids. People can supplement again with additional vitamins or over-the-counter sort of supplements, but you can also just get it from your diet if you're making changes in your diet. So again, things like certain types of fishes like salmon and anchovies, sardines, herring, trout, that sort of thing can actually be good high sources of omega-3s, sort of these oilier fishes is from what I understand. I don't eat fish myself. Other things like nuts, and then certain seeds like flax and hemp and chia seeds can potentially be high in omega-3 fatty acids, things like eggs as well. B complex vitamins, in general, what I recommend to people, because this question does come up quite often as far as B vitamins, is that B vitamins can be really helpful for patients, particularly when we're worried about the immune system, and these values can be depleted in stress. In particular, a lot of people can have, depending on their current diet, they can have low vitamin B12 levels. And so, these are things that we kind of will start to talk about when we have these conversations. In general, we'll recommend that people take sort of a B complex of vitamins. And if not taking vitamins, again, different meats, seafoods, seeds, nuts, you can kind of start to see some themes, are tend to be high in these B vitamins.
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah, of course.
So, can you just clarify what B complex vitamins
Yeah,
means? Why
that's a good
they
question.
are a complex?
Yeah. So, we think that one of the reasons why, so these B vitamins actually, their effect in the body is actually to help with a number of different processes. They're cofactors. They're involved in a number of different reactions. They all kind of work together synergistically to affect different parts of the body and the immune system. And so the reason why they come as a complex is because they all kind of work together, and that's why we sometimes recommend that these medications be, or these vitamins be taken in that complex form. It also, I think, helps because it makes things a little bit less complicated. I think it also is kind of nice because you're not worried about necessarily getting too much of one and too little of another. They're all sort of working together to help you.
And I believe I'll come to you in one second. I believe that you can use B complex vitamins sort of a little bit on an as needed basis so that you can increase them in times of stress, either emotional or things going on in your life. Can you comment on that?
Yeah. So with B complex vitamins, not everybody needs to necessarily be taking them at any given time, and sometimes people kind of elect to take it, or may increase the amount that they're taking during periods of sort of physical stress, if they're ill, emotional, or other sort of environmental stressors that are going on, and that's perfectly okay. It's definitely a conversation worth having with your physician, either your MS doctor or your primary doctor, to make sure that you're not taking too much, but it is certainly something that can be done.
Thanks very much. And we had a question over here. So can we have a mic?
Hi. Okay, question. Is there anything like Pacific that you think that would possibly should just be like taken out of our diet that's like possibly could enhance like the problems we're already having or something like that?
So I think, and just to clarify the question, so things that maybe we could do less, we could eating less in our diets. Is that right? Okay. So I think it's tough because there's a balance that needs to be struck here. What I tell people is that like food is very important. Socially, culturally, obviously, in terms of your body. And its wellness. So, restricting too heavily can be a problem for many reasons, but excess is also a problem. And so, in general, when I do recommend starting to slowly remove things from a diet, it tends to be things like processed foods, canned foods, things that are high in sodium, things like sodas that are high in sugars, that sort of thing. That's kind of where I start because I think it's kind of easy to slowly also start to remove those things from your diet, and not make such drastic or dramatic changes all at once. Past that, maybe sometimes we talk about reducing red meats or fast foods as well, trying to kind of cook at home more, incorporate more vegetables into your diet. But in general, I try to kind of tell people to take a more well rounded sort of approach to things, because I don't want them to feel like this is something that's like sort of a burdensome task for them.
I think we had another question over here.
Okay, so with someone like me, in the very beginning of my diagnosis 4 years ago, I went out and I bought every gummy vitamin known to man. I did. We all did, didn't we? I mean, we did. We bought vitamins. Still doing it. I feel so much better personally eating my vitamins. I do, versus taking and the gummy vitamins were obviously easier. Should I continue to supplement with vitamins on top of the healthy foods? I mean, I don't know.
Did you have something to add?
That's
No?
the question. Yes,
Okay,
that is
okay.
the question. Should I continue the vitamins on top of eating the healthy foods as well?
Yeah. Well, firstly, I feel like you've said a lot of things that I think firstly it's great that you've kind of been able to change your diet and you're feeling so much better. Ultimately, that's the goal, right? And if you're feeling better, then I think you've really accomplished something that I think other people can certainly do too. And I think in general, it's tough because every single person is a little bit different. There are different lifestyle factors that make certain things harder for one person. Sometimes taking vitamins is easier. Sometimes being able to cook a meal is easier. I think that ultimately it's a very much a personal decision, and I don't think you necessarily need both. I think that in general, if you can try to get most of your vitamins through your food, that's ideal. But I don't think that realistically, and it's always possible, and and that's okay. So if you think that you're getting a very sort of well-rounded diet just from the foods you're eating, you're not seeing any issues on your basic labs that you're doing, then I think that it's really perfectly fine to keep doing what you're doing and not necessarily add more to it. And I think that again, there are some people where they find that vitamins are more helpful or just easier. It's important, to be trying to do something, I think, if possible. And so that's kind of another key component of it is like, we want you to do what you can do.
So I think the other thing to think about is, unless you're talking about mega doses of vitamins, which aren't good for anybody unless you check them with your healthcare provider, your body knows what vitamins it needs and it will pee out excess. So you don't, I think, have to worry so much. And one of the things you said was that you feel better taking them. So unless you're mega dosing out,
I think that's kind of
that's okay. We have a question from our virtual audience.
Yes, 2 questions actually. First question is, what are your thoughts about moderate alcohol consumption and its impact on MS?
Yeah. So I do think that a small to moderate amount of alcohol is generally speaking okay for patients with multiple sclerosis. I tend to, I tend to recommend trying to minimize as often as possible and making sure that it's not interacting with any of your medications or kind of affecting your functioning. But in general, I tend to actually focus more on other lifestyle factors when I'm talking about these sorts of things. So like tobacco use, which Dr. Bagnato touched on. I think trying to cut down on smoking, if that's something that you're kind of partaking in, then that's something I might focus more on.
So, and I'm going to ask Megan to comment on this, but I think as a psychologist, one of the things I would urge you, whether you're a person with MS or a care partner, to think about is what purpose the alcohol is serving. If it's part of your social life and it's a drink with dinner or with friends, that's one thing. If you're using it to manage your mood, that's a different issue.
Yeah, and I think one of the areas that I find that alcohol is problematic is when people are drinking at night, and it interrupts sleep because sleep can already be impacted by MS. And so you have to kind of pay attention if you're having a couple of glasses of wine at night or something, and that's really interrupting your ability to get good sleep, then it's something that we should pay attention to as well.
I think it's also important to remember that depression is really common in MS, which you're going to hear from Megan, and alcohol is a depressant. And so, again, you're trying to take care of your health and wellness, including your emotional well-being. We have another question from the virtual audience.
I would just add, from a physical therapy perspective, sometimes we get a little bit concerned if people have balance issues or mobility issues, and, we're adding alcohol on top of that. It's just something to, think about and be mindful of, and then, you mentioned the sleep, but there's also a urinary component that's associated with alcohol use. So just, being mindful of what it does to your physical function and making sure that, whatever you're doing feels safe and comfortable in that time.
Thanks for that. Kate.
Is there any benefit to the carnivore diet? Sorry.
Yeah. Well, so I don't actually know if I know exactly what that means, but a meat heavy diet. There are some diets that I think are a little heavier on meat. I think that in general, again, I tend to recommend a more well-rounded diet, where you're kind of incorporating different things like fruits, vegetables, legumes. Meats are certainly good for you and important, but you do kind of start to worry when people are eating only one thing and then they're starting to not get enough vegetables, for example. And that's when you start to worry about things like vitamin deficiencies, like B12, that sort of thing.
So I put up your last slide, which will help a little bit
Perfect.
to answer that question, because all that comes to mind with a carnivore diet is T-Rex. So, yeah.
Yeah. And actually, if there's one particular diet that I typically recommend, it'll be something like a Mediterranean diet. And those things have already come up. Again, it's high in vegetables, fruits, legumes, olive oil, so some good fats, and sort of a little bit more sort of moderate in terms of the consumption of meats, but seafoods as well. So.
Okay, so I think we're going to move on to Lauren talking about why moving matters.
I'm going to stand because previously stated physical therapists like to move. So, exercise is a really important part of wellness for everybody. Exercise is medicine, motion is lotion. There's all of these really good sayings that go along with exercise. And as a modern society, we don't move our bodies as much as we're really meant to. And exercise more, we can all benefit from really moving our bodies and finding joy in movement. Specifically in MS, though, it can really help improve your health, reduce the risk of comorbidities. Dr. Bagnato talked a lot about your reserve and your ability to recover, and exercise is a really important part of that reserve. If you have a lot of lean muscle mass, if you have cardiorespiratory fitness, then your body's just in a better position to heal itself and move forward when you have flares or setbacks. So again, looking at wellness, we look at the comorbid conditions, but we also look at mood and cognition. There's some emerging research that exercise can be beneficial to help with cognition. And we know there's a lot of research out there that exercise is great for mood. In a lot of general populations, they found parity between things like SSRIs and structured exercise programs. So there's a lot of good that can come from moving your body. The other kind of wild thing is that it can help with your fatigue, which is, it sounds counterintuitive, right? I'm doing more, it should be making me more tired. But what we found is that reserve or that capacity improves as your body gets more trained and used to exercise. So it works with the primary fatigue that comes from MS itself that, we don't totally understand that well, but we know it's a feature of one of the cardinal features of patients' experience with MS. But it really makes a big difference on secondary fatigue as well. The fatigue that happens when, you're not able to do what you want to do, and it becomes this cycle, right? Where you're not able to do what you want to do, so then you get tired more easily, and then we just start to lose some of that reserve. It's really important to note that physical activity can take many different forms. When we think about exercise, we think about more structured exercise programs. Purposeful exercise is what I like to call it, where you go out and you have a goal and an intention. But physical activity is also really important and also really beneficial. So, I'm sure you've heard different activity pearls of wisdom here and there, taking the stairs if that's accessible to you, walking a little bit longer from your car, getting up and doing some laundry. All of those things count as physical activity, and it adds up, and can all be really beneficial. And for some people, it's as simple as getting yourself dressed. That may take a lot of time. That might be a lot of work for you. And if you do that, then you've done physical activity for that part of your day, and that's great. The current recommendations for physical activity for patients with MS are actually the same as the general population. Recommend 150 minutes of moderate intensity. Where we clarify is it should be what's feels safe and accessible to you. So, if it's more along the lines of walking or laundry, or that's, that counts as physical activity towards those minutes. So in general, having lean muscle mass, so having more muscle mass in your body is great for that reserve. It helps you do the things that you need to do. And cardiorespiratory fitness, like we talked about, it just, helps with that fatigue management and generating endurance to do the things that you want to do. There is some emerging research. I'm sure a lot of the clinicians in this room can speak more to it about the disease-modifying benefits of exercise. That's still in progress, but there's some research studies that say it may reduce the quantity of flares that patients have. So you'll have to look out for, the directions that research is going over the next 5 to 10 years. All right. Well, we'll move on here. And I guess, physical activity is accessible to everybody. It really is. We just have to find what feels good to you. My patients ask me all the time, what's the best exercise? Like, what's the perfect exercise? What should I be doing? And that really doesn't exist. It's very individualized. My comment is whatever exercise you are going to consistently be motivated to do is the best exercise for you. So if you know that you can stick with a swimming program, that's the best exercise for you. If you know that you love to dance and you dance with your family or your kids, and that's the best exercise for you to do. You want your exercise to be geared towards your abilities and your goals. It's different if your goal is to walk, through the mall without having to sit down. That's a different goal and a different type of exercise versus you want to be able to feel safe picking up your grandchild or your child. Lifting 15 pounds is different than going for a walk, and you just want to be tailoring your exercise to your abilities and your goals. So a physical therapist, is a really good care partner to have if you're having trouble figuring out what exercise looks like for you, or if you aren't sure if your intensity is the right intensity for you. So physical therapists are really great for helping you scale up or scale down your program as appropriate. And then as different functional concerns arise, trying to transfer your body to different surfaces if you're having trouble getting off the floor to play with kids, or, pick up something that you dropped, that could be a goal that you work on in physical therapy. And then, occupational therapy as well can kind of help with those activities of daily living. So it's where in your rehab team you go depends on what your goals are and your needs are.
I was talking to somebody at an in-person program, and she said to me, I make a bed and I'm exhausted. I've done nothing except make the bed. And I told her to think about everything she has to do to make that bed. Reach, stretch, bend, lift. It's an amazing thing. So my message from a mental health perspective is to recognize what you are doing and applaud yourself for what you are doing just in your daily activities, because they all count towards that 150 minutes, and recognize what you're doing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then some of the things to look for, when you're in an acute flare, that's not the right time to start an exercise routine. We usually say to wait a little bit. Oh, we have a question. Sorry.
No worries. My question is the 150 minutes a week.
Yes.
I have friends that have one great day a week and do 150 minutes of activities, and then they're literally housebound or couch-bound for the rest of the week. Are we talking about that's a beneficial way of doing it? Do we need to spread it out and get something every day? Because I can make a schedule where I would do 150 minutes and then feel it for the next 4 days.
That's a great question. And that actually segues into this fatigue piece I was going to talk about. So the question is around, how do I get that 150 minutes? What does it look like? And what do what do you feel like afterwards? So I think the important thing to note with everybody is you should be grading into a physical activity program. So if you're doing lifestyle activity right now and you want to start more of an exercise type routine, you would not start at 150 minutes. That wouldn't be appropriate for anybody. You would want to start to gradually build up and see what that looks like for you. So 1 week you might start with 20 minutes. If that's where you're starting, that's fabulous. You add 20 minutes in, you feel pretty good. You move on to 30 or 40 minutes the next week or month. So it's about scaling up or down to what feels accessible to you and looking at that fatigue. So generally what we say is if you have outsized fatigue lasting more than 24 hours that interferes with your function, then that means that that's too much for you in that time. So I think what you're describing would describe something that's really interfering with your function for the rest of the week. So that wouldn't be an appropriate target for you. So does that kind of answer your question to some extent? So if it's making you feel worse, then we want to scale it back and you want to modify it. Maybe it looks more like smaller bouts of lifestyle activity throughout the day. Maybe it means you do like 1 45-minute workout on a good day, and then you take a break and see how you feel for the rest of the week. But movement matters. More movement is better. You just want to make sure that it's not so much that it's interfering with your next 2 days.
So it would be,
yes.
I think it would be simple to say that you can listen to your body, right? That your body will tell you if you're doing the right amount or too much. Listen to it, give it some respect, and then plot your remaining activity accordingly.
Yeah, and there's a lot that plays into fatigue, right? There's your sleep quality, which Megan mentioned. You know, if you have a really crappy night's sleep, the next day might not be the best day to do a high intensity exercise program. You have lower reserves that day. You know, if you had a big family function and you're just exhausted physically, emotionally, then maybe that's not the best day to do it. Or maybe you find that when you have a really stressful experience, exercise makes you feel better. So Dr. Bagnado talked a lot about trying not to compare ourselves to other people and other patients. And it's really true. Every patient and person's experience with MS is so unique. And there's, you'll find common ground and you'll learn a lot from each other, but everyone's experience is going to be different, and what works for you from an exercise perspective might not be the best for someone else. Let's see. So MS Moves is a really great exercise catalog and program that Can Do MS has. Some people find that they need a little bit of encouragement, or they find some exercise or movement is better with community. So Can Do MS has done a great job of kind of creating a virtual community that you can access and be a part of. There's different fitness challenges if you're the type of person who feels motivated by a target or a goal. And then there's monthly meetups where people can talk about their different experiences. So there are a few other exercise programs out there that are specific to MS, but this is one that can be really great. Question.
Can we have Mike? No, they really want you to talk into the mic so they can capture it on the recording.
Okay, so weird question maybe, but I got one of those stand-up vibration platforms for the days when she was talking about she's fatigued. I go through that as well.
Mm-hmm.
And on those days, I bought a vibration platform so that I could just stand on it for 15, 20 minutes and I feel like I'm doing something. Is that actually, would that be considered activity? I don't know. I didn't know if it was like a scam or not, but I bought it and it does actually make me feel like I am doing something, right?
Yeah.
So, I mean, it does actually, and I am tired after I use it. So it did make me feel like I was doing something.
Well, let's put it this way. If standing feels like exercise to you or physical activity, then it is, right? So if you're going from seated to standing, it's more work on your body to stand. When it comes to vibration plates, there's not a lot of research yet. It is emerging. We're starting to use it with some other types of neurological disorders, but I'm not aware of a lot of research around MS with vibration.
Another question?
Did that answer your question? Okay.
Okay, I have a question. Sorry. Okay, when I found out that I had MS like in August, I was like, okay, I'm going to every gym, getting a membership and stuff. But then I literally leave and run because I'm worried that they're going to do something to hurt me worse. So I got a gym membership at the hospital, which I'm not sure if it's best. Like, I don't know if it's best to just go to the hospital with their gym and deal with them because they might understand me better, or to just take my chances and just go to a normal like crunch time gym and just try to power lift and do whatever they tell me to do. So I was just curious, what do you think would possibly be best?
So a lot to unpack there. I'm excited. I think it's great that you're so excited about exercise. I think that's awesome. I'll return back to, it's what feels good to you and what you're going to stick with. And listening to your body and what your body is feeling. If you do some heavier lifting and that's something you've been doing and it feels good to you, okay. So I'll refer back to the scaling up, right? So we start gradually. We see how you feel, and if movements feel good, then you keep doing them. You build from there. But if someone's starting an exercise program, we don't want to start at 150%, right? We want to start at 15, 20, and kind of build up from there. And then finding a trained guide can be really helpful when you're starting out. So that could be an exercise physiologist at a hospital who's really comfortable with treating patients with MS. It could be a physical therapist who's also comfortable treating patients with MS. There are some trainers who have advanced training in neurological conditions. They're a little harder to find, but they exist. So it's really about you finding a guide that you feel comfortable with. You could even start with some of these online exercise programs and kind of get a feel at home for what feels good to you. But it's great that you're excited about exercise. That's amazing. Just, listen to your body and start scaling up slowly.
Maybe could I add one thing real quick, which would be just that, in this, when I see a patient and we're talking about exercise for the first time, depending on their limitations, we may just start by saying, let's have you see the physical therapist and talk to them about some exercises to start doing before moving forward with this training regimen that you're kind of going to be taking on. So again, taking it kind of slow, listening to your body, incorporating this principle of energy conservation, kind of trying to start to listen to your body and understand what your limits are. One thing to maybe add into everything that's been said would be just that with MS in particular, sometimes people feel a little bit worse when they get overheated when they're exercising. So that's just kind of something to keep in mind. And there's ways to kind of address that with your therapist, the physical therapist, and with your neurologist, because there are cooling vests available. There are a way to sort of cater that exercise to you as an individual. So
I think it's also helpful to make sure that your goals and the trainer's goals are aligned. So to make sure that they know that you live with MS, and after a physical therapist probably has helped you establish your goals, that you then share those with the person in the gym or the trainer so that you're not working at cross purposes,
Can you hear me? Okay.
Yeah.
On that note, I understand the cooling vests are there to help cool the body down, but in doing what my body tells me to do, my body wants more heat. So am I at risk by staying in the sun too much?
So I think from just an MS perspective in general, again, it's kind of a matter of listening to your body, because there are, of course, risks with getting overheated, feeling lightheaded and uncomfortable. But in general, the actual act of getting or kind of increasing your body temperature doesn't have an impact necessarily on your MS. And so in that way, I think that is kind of reassuring. But again, you have to kind of listen to your body. If you're not feeling well, then that's going to obviously lead to issues we don't want you to have.
And I think we know that while majority of people who have temperature sensitivity are sensitive to heat, I've known lots of people with MS who are actually cold sensitive. And so their symptoms tended to act up or flare when they were cold. So listening to your body seems to be the key thing until am I more sensitive to heat? Am I more sensitive to cold? What happens to me in either of those extremes? And what do I need to do?
And there's lots of different equipment out there. There's a cooling vest, there's cooling scarves. Some people prefer to exercise at specific times of the day. Some people prefer to exercise in a pool. So there's lots of options out there depending on if you're cold or heat sensitive. A lot of my patients have both. So there's a temperature range that they just feel best at, and that's the range they like to stay in. So,
Megan.
I just wanted to make a quick comment when we're talking about nutrition changes and exercise changes from a mental health perspective. A lot of time what I'm working with people on is how do I stay motivated? How do I get started? And so I tend to tell people really use the first 2 weeks as an exploratory phase. Can I actually do this? Is this something that I like? Because a lot of times what I see is somebody gets really gung-ho, they get started, and then it kind of falls off the wagon, and then they feel really demoralized. And if that tends to be your cycle, then look at the first couple weeks as, let me see if this is even going to work for me. And then once I figure out what is going to work for me, then you start to scale up. The other thing is there's some research in something called Tiny Habits. There's a researcher, his name is BJ Fogg. He talks about 2 minutes. So in order to maintain a routine that gets part of your everyday practice, we want to do something every single day, even when you're feeling fatigued. So if you can do something for 2 minutes, even if that's just sitting up and standing up and sitting down a couple of times, then that keeps your routine going. So find something that you can do for 2 minutes. And if on some days you can do it more, great. If on other days you can't, then your 2 minutes sets your routine. So those two strategies are something that I work with a lot of the people that I work with, help them.
So since you already have the floor, Megan, I think it's time to talk about getting concerned about time, but I don't want to miss this
I think
last slide.
I think we've had a really good conversation about exercise. If you look at your slides, they give you some really good ideas for what movement could look like for you.
I just want to take one. Go ahead.
I have a question. When I was first diagnosed, I became very overwhelmed with all of the medications that they would give me to treat all of these little symptoms that I had. And so I had extreme fatigue where I was in the bed all the time. And I just felt like it was making the situation worse. So I looked at all of the medications and realized I felt like they were causing a lot of problems for me. And so I started to listen to my body more like what y'all are describing. And I guess what my question here is, I found that cannabis was extremely beneficial for me in a lot of different aspects of my life. And I'm just wondering, as doctors, what do y'all think of that? Like, is there a point where I shouldn't be using that as part of my therapy? Because I literally came off of all the medications except for the MS medications, and I feel like I'm very much improved.
And I think that maybe this is kind of in some ways a question that's similar to the question about alcohol. I think some of it is obviously dependent on different regulations. And there is potentially some benefit of things like CBD in patients who have multiple sclerosis. I think it's very much an individualized decision. And I think everyone has to be really careful because there's a lot of different products available for people. I don't personally make any particular recommendations for patients about it, actually. But if patients find that it helps them, I don't recommend it against it. I kind of allow them to I just recommend being safe and sort of aware of the potential pitfalls of doing those things. I don't know if anybody else can, I think there's
I think the other thing to think about is that you don't want to be making those decisions in a vacuum, right? So if you're worried about the combined side effects of medications making you more fatigued, that's a great conversation to have with your neurologist or with your pharmacist, but you don't want to just stop things willy-nilly because then you're asking your provider to help you with their hands tied behind their back. So whatever you decide, don't keep your provider in the dark because that just interferes with their ability to help you. Okay, so being mindful of our time. Go ahead, Megan.
Okay, I'm going to start off with a little bit of an exercise. So, whether you're in the room right now or in the virtual audience, I want you to raise your hand if you've ever felt sad. Okay. Raise your hand if you've ever felt happy. Raise your hand if you've ever felt worried. Raise your hand if you've felt more than one emotion in the same day. Okay. So obvious, these are all obvious answers, right? But the reason I do this is because sometimes when we hear emotional wellness, mental health, we think, oh, this is how we get happy, right? This is how we get rid of all those nasty emotions that we don't want to experience. And as a mental health provider, when I think about emotional wellness, I'm thinking, can you problem solve hard things when they show up? When hard things show up and it brings your mood down, are you able to bounce back from that? Can you feel resilient? And so, there was a grad school professor I had, more than a decade ago who said, when you have those hard emotions and they stop you from functioning, when they stop you from spending time with the people you love, when they stop you from doing the things that you enjoy doing, when they stop you from getting out of bed, that's when we want to start thinking about how do we get a little bit of more help and assistance. When you come and see me as a mental health provider, I'm not going to get rid of you ever feeling sad again. I wish I could. I'm not going to get rid of you ever feeling anxious again. I wish I could. Right? Actually, I don't, because those things are really important. They're part of a full spectrum of the experience of us as human beings. And so really what we want to say is, are those emotions helping us? Do they serve a purpose? Are they giving us insights into our daily life? Or are they stopping us from functioning? So that's what I mean by emotional well-being. We also know that with MS, there's something that is called healthy grief. Has anybody experienced a change in their functioning that then brought on feelings of sadness, frustration, anger, irritability, anxiousness, worry about the future, all those things, right? So that's normal. I mean, think about that. Anytime you have a major life change, and with MS, you're living with lots of major life changes, right? When you have a major life change, it takes time to adjust. It takes time to problem solve and figure out, how do I deal with this now? Who's going to be my support team? Are they still going to be there? And you're almost having to figure out life a little bit again, and that takes time and adjustment. So that's what we mean by healthy grief, right? If we lose a loved one who passes away, that's never going to go away completely, right? We might 10 years down the line, not feel that intense pain that we did right after the loss. But those feelings are going to come to the surface every so often. And the same can be true of living with MS. So we want to know what to do with those feelings when they come to the surface. And if we have an exacerbation, which impacts our life, we want to know what to do with those emotions when they come to the surface. That's kind of the normal emotional experience. Now, with MS, there's also higher rates of clinical depression and clinical anxiety. And so what's the difference? Part of it's what I said earlier. Is it impacting your ability to function? But with depression, there's kind of two hallmark features. One is that you're feeling down and depressed most of the day, nearly every day, for at least 2 weeks or more. The other one is that you are not able to do the things you enjoy for, again, 2 weeks or more. And there's a difference here with fatigue and enjoyment, right? There are times when I talk to somebody and they say, I love watching movies, but I am so fatigued, I can't even open my eyelids, right? You still want to watch the movie. That's different than what I'm talking about with depression, is that I don't even want to watch that movie anymore. It's not even interesting to me anymore. So if you're having that kind of sensation for more than 2 weeks and you're really feeling down and depressed for more than 2 weeks, that's when we start thinking maybe this is more than just healthy grief. Maybe this is more than just kind of figuring out my adjustment period, and getting some extra help and support could be helpful. Similarly, with anxiety, it's normal to feel anxious sometimes, right? It's normal to feel worried about things sometimes. If that anxiety and that worry is stopping you from functioning and you feel like you can't control it, and that feeling is lasting for more than 2 weeks, then maybe it's helpful to get some support. 1 in 2 people with MS will experience a clinical depression in their lifetime, and 1 in 3 people will experience clinical anxiety in their lifetime. So these are high numbers, and it's important to kind of feel out for yourself what you might be experiencing. Any questions? Yes. Oh, we got to move it along. Okay. I'm going to just let me do one more slide. Maybe let's just go to the last slide. The other two, yeah, so go ahead.
It's on? Yep. Hey, you just said clinical depression and clinical anxiety. I think that's
Yep.
what you just said. Are they different? And I've always felt like they were the same. They came together.
Anxiety and depression?
Yeah. Or can you just be clinically anxious or
It's a great
just-
question.
yeah.
Many times they do come together. For a lot of people, you can experience both, but you can experience one or the other. There tends to be sometimes people come into the office and they're feeling anxious and they're worried about the future. So that would be the difference. One person comes in and they feel hopeless about the future, right? So there's like a little bit of a distinction in terms of how your body experiences them. Many times they do come together, but you can experience one versus the other.
My question is, and I'm recently diagnosed, how do you keep your mental well-being when most of the things that I'm hearing, and I may not be hearing all of them, is we don't know, you may have something in a month, you may have something in 3 years, you may have nothing at all. And so how do you keep your mental capacity about you and not be depressed when is that the answer?
So this is a really good question and probably is going to take more than a few minutes, but I'll give you my brief summary. One is that it's helpful to, if you're continuing to have those kinds of thoughts, it may be helpful to work with a mental health provider, coach, somebody and ask these questions more deeply. But the other thing is I often talk to people about what are your controllables? What do you have control over? You may not have control over what medications are available. You may not have control over how fast the research is moving. You do have control over whether the medication that you're working with works for you and whether you're taking it. You have control over some of these things that we were talking about, like health and wellness, nutrition, exercise. So sometimes it's helpful to kind of zoom out and say, what is in my control and what is outside of my control? Have I done the things that are within my control? And if I have, then I start to talk about using some strategies for those ruminative thoughts. So those thoughts that keep popping back into your head about, but the what ifs, right? Those what if questions. And there's lots of strategies for managing those what if questions, which maybe like we could talk a little bit afterwards, or in some of our group sessions. Let's talk about that, bring that up. There's lots of different strategies that you can use to help try and manage those thoughts if they keep popping into your head.
And a really good starting point is actually to write them down on a piece of paper, on a column, so that every time you're over in this column about the what ifs and the uncontrollables, you bring yourself back over to this side of the hedge and say, okay, where do I want to focus here? Because these are things that can really have an impact on.
So I just want to end basically with having, in the last 3 minutes, what strategies do you all use to manage your mood? And I'll repeat back for the audience because like this to me too much to like run around. So anybody want to start? What is one strategy that you use that helps you manage your mood? Exercise. Any? Louder? Anyone else? Meditation? Walking? Medication? Humor? Reading? Vacations. I like that one. Therapy. Dog. Playing with a dog. Anyone else? Family games. Others? Yoga. Any? Practice being grateful. Awesome. Others? Sit in your room and watch TV. That's great. Yeah. Sometimes a good funny movie, or even like one that makes you cry to get those emotions out, they're all good. So as you all can see, there's, even in this room, I think we probably came up with at least 10 or 15, right? There's lots of strategies for managing mood day to day, and each one is going to be a little bit different for each person. And so you can either kind of brainstorm those things with loved ones, or you can work with a mental health professional. And there are some of us out there who do specialize in working with people that have chronic medical conditions or even MS specifically. And that can be really helpful.
So just to wrap it up for all of you, because Laura's coming up here. Diet is a 4-letter word that may provoke stress and anxiety, but of course now you have all kinds of strategies to deal with stress and anxiety because you've been listening to Megan. But think more about feeding your body, feeling well, managing your other health conditions. Exercise is medicine. And your emotional well-being is just as important to your overall quality of life as your physical well-being.
Thanks, Roz. And I want to thank the panel. You guys did a fantastic job. So let's hear it for our panel. So my name is Laura Allen. I'm the Corporate Relations Manager at Can Do MS. And I have a special treat for us today. First of all, as you know, a lot of these programs are due to the generous sponsorship that we get from our sponsors. And with that, we have 2 of our sponsors here that are just going to say a few words. And I have the pleasure and the honor of introducing Allison Handler from Novartis. She is the Director of Patient Advocacy, and she's going to say a few words to get us started before lunch.
Hi, everybody. I'll try to talk fast. I am from New Jersey because I know myself and my colleagues are going to be standing between you and lunch. But I do want to thank everybody for coming today and for this opportunity. Again, as I was introduced, I'm with Novartis. I serve as a Director of Patient Advocacy, which means I get the pleasure of working with patient organizations such as Can Do MS in the U.S. And it's really my absolute pleasure to be here today to support this program. I really would like to take this moment, first of all, to recognize the Can Do team for organizing this amazing day and all the programming that they do, focus on education, connection, and activation. Every one of you with a Can Do shirt, you really all do make an amazing impact for all the MS families and caregivers and stakeholders, and we're really grateful for everything you do. So I'd like to just take a moment for that. And we're really grateful and proud to be a gold sponsor of all of the community programs that Can Do is doing this year in 2024, including the one we're here for today. And on behalf of my colleagues, and if you were at the exhibit tables in the morning, and if you haven't made later, a few who are here today, we're really just honored and grateful to be able to partner in these situations. What we really like and what I really value in terms of the collaboration is seeing the execution of these programs and the way that they do it, and now the ability to see some broader reach of these programs happening and the amazing attendance that's showing up for all of you in the community. In addition to these programs, I think you heard about the MS Moves program. We're really proud to have been able to sponsor the Jumpstart program in the past, where those are monthly programs that feature experts providing information on specific symptoms, challenges, and strategies for managing life and with MS. Heard a lot of you talking about some of these challenges already today. We also continue to support other programs such as the Take Charge program, which is a virtual wellness program, which is designed to help people living with MS. And these are a lot of educational efforts and programming that, while sometimes we as companies may not be able to provide that, we love to partner with organizations that can provide that amazing content. So I'd like to also personally thank Kathy Costello, the Chief Operating Officer over there in the corner there. Woo woo! She gets a round of applause for her expertise and participation. We also bring in these experts like Kathy to our advisory councils, where she's able to provide incredible insights and represent the MS community to help shape broader education efforts internally at Novartis, but also with other collaborative patient organizations as well. So we're really proud to be partners with that. So thank you, Kathy. And these are just a handful of the ways in which we work with organizations, specifically Can Do. And I really just want to continue to be excited for what we will be able to develop in the future. And finally, just at Novartis, specifically in neuroscience, which I'm here representing today, we really are committed to understanding and solving some of the most burdensome neurologic conditions, such as MS, to really continue to help improve your quality of life, not only for those that are living with MS, but the caregivers that are here today as well, and continue to hopefully make a positive impact on society. We really do aim to lead discovery, development, and delivery of innovative medicines, and that will hopefully create transformational impact for people living with these severe neurologic conditions. We've had this commitment for over 80 years, and we really look to continue to make a difference for patients worldwide. And just to wrap up, as a Novartis associate, I'm also a trained pharmacist, but also personally as a caregiver for somebody who's living with Parkinson's disease and truly understanding the impact of neurologic disease. It really is my honor to be able to work with organizations and be here to listen and observe and see and hear how this impacts each of you to ensure that we can support programming like this to make sure that it continues to be available for members of the MS community. So I thank each of you for taking this time to invest in yourselves, to show up today, to continue to learn, to be curious and ask questions, and, just showing up. That in of itself is a big step. So thank you for that. And you're an inspiration to me and make me continue to want to show up for what I do. So thank you so much. Enjoy the workshops. Enjoy your lunch this afternoon. And don't forget to stop by and say hi to my colleagues if you can make it back downstairs. So thank you.
Thank you so much.
Appreciate it. Now, I have the pleasure of introducing Dr. Ed Fox, and he is with TG Therapeutics.
Everyone, thank you very much for this opportunity, and it's great working with Can Do and seeing Kathy Costello and so many people that I've known for many, many years. Dr. Harold Moses will be out here in a while, and he and I have been in clinical trials together for 20 years plus. I was in clinical practice for over 30 years and doing clinical research. And now I'm working with the company TG Therapeutics. And as you're hearing, we have, a number of different companies that have gone full scale into MS. When I started in practice in 1992, there were 0 medicines FDA approved for treatment of MS. So I'm one of those people who get to say, I remember when. But over the course of a career, just seeing the advances that took place in MS care has been amazing. And, for people, whether newly diagnosed or established for a number of years in MS, I certainly want to kind of bring forth the idea that, a company, whether it be a giant company working on a multitude of diseases or it being TG Therapeutics, which is a much smaller company with, only about 280 employees, a medication that was just launched in December of 2022, that the sort of devotion in research has led to having so many choices in MS therapeutics. And the idea of being able to find the right medicine for each person is a goal that we still have. It can be very confusing when you have MS to not know whether you're on the right medication. How can you know whether that medicine is right for you? And that's ongoing research that is happening right now to better understand the disease and better understand the choices that you have and the goals that you should have for yourself. I'm thrilled to always be able to hear talks like earlier today, because it motivates me as well as to how we need to be part of an organization that supports the mental health care, the physical health care, the entirety of MS care. And so to have now a medication on the market, Briumvi, that has been on the market for a little over a year, and to now have thousands of patients, over 5,000, who have been given this medication. The question that people often have is, where do you go from there? Once a medication is out, how do you do further research to be able to even better understand it? Well, one is you don't stop, and you have a pipeline of other medications. This meeting, I've had a wonderful week in Nashville, and the meeting, there's been so much more information every year to be able to understand really what our goal is now is to be able to explain, freely to everybody that the communication between the pharmaceutical providers and the population of people with MS needs to be an ongoing dialogue. And we want to be part of it. All of them want to be part of it. And that's why we have the booths out there, why we make an effort to come here and speak. Because if you do have questions, you should be able to ask them and have them answered. And so I do certainly welcome further conversation, but I stand between you and lunch. Let's go. All right. Thank you very much for the opportunity.